Hey friend, thank you for joining me for another episode of Parents Who Write. Today I am joined by Sarah Birnbach, who writes memoir. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Why don't we just jump right in and give us a bit of your writing background, your writing journey so far?
In terms of my background, I've been writing all my life. I am a certified journal facilitator, and I've been journaling since I was a teenager. During my professional career, I was writing personnel handbooks, human resource management forms that were used by organizations, policy manuals, and things that had to pass a legal inspection. So part of my writing career was journaling, which is very from the heart, and the other part was legalese, which is very much from the brain.
That is two very different parts of the brain working together, though. I love that. So how did that evolve?
Well, during the year after my father died, which is the crux of my memoir, A Daughter's Kaddish, I filled 4 journals that year. I don't journal every single day, but during that period, I was journaling every single day. And after, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year after I finished that 11-month mourning period, I decided to transcribe those journals. I've never done that before, but I wanted to sort of relive that experience. I wanted to reread them, sort of harvest out what were the most important things to me about that year. What had I learned? And so I transcribed the journals. I began taking writing classes at the Writer's Center, which is in Bethesda, Maryland, which is very close to where I live, just outside of Washington, D.C. And I started writing essays, taking segments of those journal entries and turning them into essays. I didn't really think about writing a memoir. I didn't set out to write a memoir, but I wrote these essays for class. And then the instructor said to me, "You should put these together in a memoir." And that was the start of my career as a book author. I had had many of my essays published in different literary magazines. I had won national awards for essays. When my instructor said, "You should put these together as a memoir," I was, wow, okay, all right.
I love that. I love when we find the right teachers who can inspire and encourage us and nudge us in the direction because they can see our potential.
Absolutely. I will never forget her. Her name is Ellen Herbert, and she transformed my life.
Oh, that's so amazing. You mentioned being a journal facilitator. What does that mean?
I teach other people techniques for journaling, for getting their thoughts, their ideas, their dreams, their goals down on paper. Many people have said to me, "Oh, I have a journal," or "I've bought a bunch of journals, but the pages are still blank and I'm intimidated." And I teach techniques that people can use to get over that intimidation, to get started putting words on paper. I've done some workshops on starting to journal. I've done a workshop on journaling through grief, because what we know is that when we handwrite, we activate a different part of the brain than we do when we're typing. And there have been many scientific studies that have shown that journaling can help overcome physical challenges, diagnoses, medical diagnoses. And it's like the cheapest form of therapy there is. You could go to the office supply store and buy a composition book for, I don't know, about $2. And writing helps us so many ways. I know that's not the objective of this podcast, but I can't say enough about the power of journaling and how it can help transform our lives.
I love that. We talk about journaling on the podcast a lot, and I didn't even know that you did that. So this is why I love that it's an open conversation, that we can see where the conversation is going to take us. I mean, I definitely want to dive into what it was like writing a memoir, but I've got to talk about this journaling thing first, because that's where we're at. What are your 3 top tips on helping somebody to get those words and thoughts down on the page?
One tip is, if you are a reader of books, just open any book that you love to any page, take a sentence, and start writing about it. The other tip I would have is that if you are feeling intimidated, then put the pen on the paper and start writing, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to write. And the other tip that I would have is, in order to inspire you to journal in the first place, you need to have a journal that inspires you. Pick whatever kind of book. You can go to a bookstore and pay $35 for a leather-bound journal, or you can go to an office supply store and pay $2. But whatever it is, it should inspire you. I have all kinds of journals. I have large ones, small ones, spiral bound, hard bound, soft bound, lined, unlined, depending upon my mood. I recently was going to Israel to volunteer with the IDF, and I wanted a new journal. I wanted to take a new one with me to record my experiences and my thoughts. And I went to Staples and I found a journal with a velvet cover. This is the journal that I bought, and it's so soft and it's so cuddly. And I brought it home and my husband said, "You bought that? I've never seen you buy a journal that looks like a little girl's journal." But even touching it, it felt so comforting to me. And I carried it all through Israel while I was on my army duty. So in terms of a tip, the journal has to be something that you like to hold, where the paper is kind to your eyes. I tend not to use white paper because I don't like the glare on the page. Sometimes I'm writing in all different locations. Sometimes I'm on airplanes. Sometimes I'm in restaurants. And so I want to make sure that the pages are not bright white. And the other thing you absolutely must have is a pen that feels comfortable in your hand. It can't skip on the paper. It can't blot. Some people like a lightweight pen. Some people like a heavyweight pen. People who know me over the years, I've had people gift me some of the most expensive pens, Mont Blanc pens, cross pens. But my favorite, and the one that I go back to over and over again, is a Bic pen.
They write so smoothly on the page. I understand.
They do.
This is my favorite pen right here. We talk about pens. This is my favorite pen. And the reason why is because it's an erasable pen. I love that writers can talk about our love for pens and which are our favorites. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I volunteered for the book fair at my kids' elementary school. And I got this one, which has a little owl in a teacup. And then it's a fidget because I can spin it too. And I love to just sit there and spin it. And I have to hide it from my kids when they come into my office because they're like, "Give me the owl pen, mama." And I'm like, "No, I bought you so many books at the book fair," which is why Dad is now like, "Please don't volunteer next year." But I was like, "No, this is my pen." Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it. And there is a very important connection here between your journaling and your memoir, because I've always said that journaling is the gateway to creative writing. And so it makes perfect sense to me that you would then take something that was so deep and meaningful and emotional and be able to convert that or transition or change it, or I don't know, I can't think of the right word right now, but turn it into, it's just not a strong verb, but anyway, turn it into a memoir. But I have a question about that beforehand. I just did a recent workshop about writing about grief. And yes, it was an amazing workshop. Yeah. And the instructor was telling us how grief is not portrayed accurately a lot of times in books and films, and that the 5 steps of grief, that was actually written for people who were in hospice, who were dying. That process is not meant for other people. And the reason why people are trying to get it out now, like that process is not for you, is because it can make people who are grieving feel like, I'm not doing this in the right order. I'm not grieving the right way. And it's like, you're already going through so much. You don't need that pressure on you. So yeah. So the big question that I have that's related to that now is, one of the things that the facilitator said is that writing about grief is immensely powerful, like you said, but don't put your work out into the world until you have healed. Because if you're already so raw and people don't receive your work well, you're just adding salt to the wound in a sense, right? So my question is, when you put out your memoir and while you were writing it, did you feel like it was a healing process? And how did you know that you were ready to share it, that you were in a place where you could do that?
My father died in September of 2000, and the prayer practice that I undertook, which is recounted in A Daughter's Kaddish, was an 11-month process. So that took me to almost the fall of 2001. In the following months, my granddaughter was born. So it was quite some time. I don't remember exactly, 8 months, 9 months before I started transcribing my journals. So now we're into about 2002, 2003. And then I started taking the classes at the Writer's Center. Yes, absolutely. Writing in my journals helped me to heal. It helped me to vent my anger at God for taking my father. It helped me connect with my father. I wrote letters to him in my journals. I wrote dialogues between him and me in my journals. So the journaling process was extremely helpful, and the prayer practice that I adopted was extremely helpful to me in healing. So once I transcribed the journals and started taking the classes, I started writing short stories and essays from those journal entries. I don't remember exactly what year it was when my instructor suggested that I might write a memoir, but it might have been 2006 or 7. I was raising children. I had 2 jobs. I had a home. I was a single mom. And you talk about parents who write. It took me quite some time to put together what I considered a book. Then I hired 2 different developmental editors to read it and see if it was publishable, if it was marketable, if it was worthy of being published. After that, I sought an agent. It was about 2015 or 2016, and I started looking for agents. I used Jane Friedman's guidelines for how to put together a book proposal, and that took me quite some time. I would say it probably took me about 1.5 years. But in 2018, an agent picked me up and said she would represent me because my book proposal was the best one she had ever read. And so I can't say enough about Jane Friedman's guideline for how to write a book proposal, but it's
I love
arduous.
her.
It is very arduous.
Yeah, she's amazing.
I do too. I do too. But the process for putting together the book proposal took me a long time. And then I had the agent for 2 years, from 2018 to 2020. She wasn't able to sell the book to a traditional publisher. And because A Daughter's Kaddish has a Jewish theme, she went out to particularly Jewish-focused publishers. And after 2 years, I thought, my time clock is ticking away here. I'm not getting any younger. I'm going to take this into my own hands. We parted very amicably, no problems. And I looked for a hybrid publisher. And in the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021, I contacted Wonderwell Press. And the publisher, Maggie Langrick, said, "We love your story. We think we can make it a stronger memoir." And so I signed with Wonderwell, and my book was finally published in September of 2022. A Daughter's Kaddish, My Year of Grief, Devotion, and Healing, was published by Wonderwell Press.
And
so it was a long journey between my father's death in 2000 and the publication of this memoir in 2022.
So you definitely had time to make sure that you were ready to get that out there. But I also really appreciated in the beginning where you were saying how you didn't even really start to transcribe the memoir or the journals until about 9 to 10 months had passed. So even then you still had some separation before you were ready to tackle this.
Yes. And it wasn't because I was reluctant to do it. It was because I had a brand new granddaughter and children and a job, 2 jobs. And so it wasn't that I made a decision to put it off. It was just that life had intervened.
Life. I get you on that one. I get you. So what do you wish that you had known before you started writing a memoir?
I wish I had known that journal entries do not a narrative make. that there are things that I know about my life that I don't write in my journal. For example, the day that the nurse called us from the hospital and said we should come right away, my father probably wouldn't last that day. I don't write in my journal that my mother was wearing her pink nightshirt and standing over the sink when the phone call came. I just wrote in my journal, the nurse called us and we rushed to the hospital. So writing a narrative that will be of interest to a reader is different than writing to yourself in your own journal.
How did you recall that she was wearing a pink dress and be able to put that in your book?
How did I remember? I just remembered it because when that phone call came, my mother looked at me and my mother never cried, but she was tearing up and she said, he's not going to make it. And that vision of my mother turning around from the sink to face me, it just lives in my memory. It's like one of those moments in time that sort of lives in your memory like a photograph. It's just a snapshot of a moment in time. But I remember it like I remember wearing Mary Jane shoes to go to synagogue with little white lacy anklet socks. It's not in my journal that I wore Mary Jane shoes with little white anklet socks, but it's a memory that I have. And so writing a narrative was one of the more challenging things because my essays derived from my journal entries.
And your developmental editors helped point that out, saying we need a setup here and these details filled in and
make the scene come alive. Show the scene. Build the scene.
I love it. I love it. I love hearing people quote back to me. That's great. What did you assume about writing memoir and what were you correct about, but what actually really surprised you aside from having to write a narrative instead of journal articles?
What surprised me about the writing of it or since I've written it?
Either.
What surprised me since I've written and published the memoir is that readers have actually been inspired by my words. I've received emails, unsolicited emails from readers thanking me and telling me the ways that my memoir has resonated for them. I've never written to an author after I've read a book. Even authors of the top 5 books that I've ever, that I think of as the best books I've ever read, it never occurred to me to write to an author. So that's been one of the surprising things. The other thing that surprised me, when the book was ready to go to print and it had been copy edited and proofread and gone over and over by tons of different sets of eyes, I asked my publisher to give me 2 days. I wanted to read it out loud. And when I read that memoir out loud, it took me 2 days. I found mistakes. I was like, oh my gosh, A Daughter's Kaddish has been read by at least 6, 8, 10 sets of eyes over and over again. Reading it out loud, I found that I had the word buoy 3 times within 2 sentences. When you're reading it, you don't think of that. But when you read it out loud, it's like, oh my gosh, why was I so stuck on that one word? Other things that surprised me in the writing, I don't know so much if it was a surprise as much as a learning. I learned how to write more narratively. I learned how to create scenes. I learned how to create dialogue because even though in my journals I do dialogue with my dad, for example, I had to write in my memoir dialogues that I had with my mother. And in my journals, I don't have them written out the way you would see a script written out, the way dialogue appears in a book. I just had, Mom said this and I said that. And I can't believe my mother said this. I can't believe Mom said this to me. In writing A Daughter's Kaddish, I had to make it dialogue that the reader could tell who was saying what and how it was being said. And it also surprised me that you can't say she said.
Action tags. That is one of my favorite things that I go over with clients. I'm going to put that in here right now because I really think it's important. When we say that you don't want to always say said, that doesn't mean that you replace said with commented, replied, murmured, all of those versions. Exactly. You don't want to do that because Our brains as readers are trained to skip over said and asked. They are invisible words to us. So we do want to default to those words. Yes. And so when you put a lot of emphasis on replied, retorted, murmured, commented, whispered, all of those things, you're actually drawing more attention to them and it pulls the reader out of the story. So, yeah,
wow.
I'm glad this is what I love what I do. So the trick around that to get rid of the saids and the asks so you don't have them is when you add an action tag in front or behind the dialogue on the same line that tells you who is speaking. So instead of, I love you, Bob said, instead you can put before or after that, Bob put down his glass and looked at me. I love you. Right. And so you don't have to have the said and the asked all the time. Sometimes you do just want to do that because you want the dialogue to move a little bit faster. So you don't have to put in all those action tags. But otherwise, you do want those action tags because it reduces the number of saids and asks. There you go. Editing tip thrown in.
Great wisdom. Great.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Another tip. I'll use this in my next book.
I love that. So, what is the best writing advice that you got or that you found made the biggest difference in your narrative writing?
One of the biggest differences was joining a critique group. And this particular group that I'm in emerged out of one of the classes at the Writers Center. After the class was over, we decided we really wanted to keep workshopping our pieces together. We started that writing group, I think it's about 15 years ago now, and we still meet twice a month. We workshop each other's pieces. I've had a book published. One of the members of our group is on his third book now. All of us have had essays or short stories published in different literary magazines and journals. And we are wonderful support to each other. If you can find a group or a class where your work can be workshopped, it is one of the greatest things that you can do for yourself. Of course, you have to be open to hearing critiques. And an important thing to remember would be to join a group where people know how to give feedback in a way that doesn't cut you off at the knees. And I've been very blessed with my group because we are kind to each other. I have a tendency for dangling participables. And one of the women in our group is fanatic for finding them. She's so focused on them. And one time she wrote back to me, I couldn't find a single dangling participle in this whole piece. And I felt, wow, okay, great, I've succeeded. So having a critique group or taking classes where you can have your work workshopped by other people, but do so where the environment is compassionate and people are really committed to helping you be your best writer. I don't encourage people to join a group where somebody just says to you, oh, I really liked your story, period. That isn't helpful. It's nice to hear, yeah, I really liked your story, or, oh, this is a great story. But I want to know, what did I leave out? What do you need more of? What do you need less of? We do line edits for each other's pieces, but we also do more overarching comments like, I need to know more about this character, or your protagonist doesn't feel quite authentic in this section. Or, page 8 seems like you're rambling. That has made the biggest difference. And if I can encourage any writer who is listening to this call to find a writing group, I feel like I would have made a difference in the listeners' lives.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pass on another bit of wisdom then based on what you just said. It's one of the best things that I learned when I got my master's in creative writing from Hopkins. And I will forever love Mark Farrington. I've mentioned him before on the podcast. I should tell him, Mark, I mentioned you on my podcast. But he taught us how to provide feedback that truly helped the author. And he made us look at the piece. And first thing we had to do was identify what the author's goal for the piece was. And because we could pinpoint what the author was trying to do, their goal, their purpose for that, it prevented us from saying, well, I wish this had happened, or I wanted this to happen, because instead you're focusing like, no, the author's goal is this. And then he would have us identify what in the piece supported that goal, helped them achieve that goal, and what distracted and took away from it. It was amazing. And I've taken that through all of my editing. So when I'm looking at my clients' chapters, I always start with, what is the purpose of this chapter? what is working really well and what's distracting. And so it's advice that I have used for the last 20 plus years. And yeah.
During the time that I was writing A Daughter's Kaddish, I read so many books on the craft of writing. I am now working on another book, and it is nonfiction, but a friend just referred this book to me, The Emotional Craft of Fiction. And it is transforming the way I think about putting emotion into my writing. I'm not even past the second chapter, and already I've gone back to my draft manuscript and made amazing changes in the writing. So if you don't have a place like the Writer's Center we have in Bethesda, which, by the way, offers many of its classes online, and so people from all over the world can attend classes at the Writer's Center. But if you don't have that luxury or that ability or that time, then reading books about craft is also amazingly helpful.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for joining me on the show. All of your contact information is located in the show notes, but what is your last message to our audience?
Keep writing. Put the pen on the paper, put the butt in the chair, and keep writing. And if your internal critic starts talking to you, tell her to take a seat in the chair over there and come back in 30 minutes.
I love that. And where can we find you?
The best place to find me is at www.sarahbirnbach.com. That's SarahBirnbach.com. And I hope you will come and look for me there. Erin, it's been a privilege to be a part of this podcast with you today. And I've learned some things from you as well. So thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much. I love hearing that. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and your words of wisdom and your journaling advice. That's going to help a lot of people. So thank you again.